Let's go. Richard Moore, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here, man.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to it, Jack. Can't wait to hang out and see what questions you got for me.
Amazing. As we were just saying, a lot of people in the world right now, they want to build something before others believe in them, especially my generation. I think it's really easy to look online, see what you've done in the past 10 years, 15 years, and say, hey, I want to do that. If I start posting on LinkedIn, maybe I can sell a course on how to sell things, right? But you have a whole backlog of years in corporate as a sales director preceding that experience. And my generation is tempted to want people to believe in us before we have the proof.
Yeah.
So what do you have to say to those people? Why is it so hard to get people to believe in you before you have the proof? And what do we do about that?
A really good quote is David Ogilvy, who, if anyone here listening to this doesn't know who he is, you need to find out. He's like the godfather of advertising copy. So he founded Ogilvy, the advertising business. And he said, and this is your answer, the customer's not a moron. The customer is your wife. And what he means by this is you can't get away with not having the credentials unless you find some that can work. You can't get away with it because the customer's not an idiot. They can see it. But what you can do is recognize a very important truth that most people overlook is they talk about the market or people or customers or, buyers or companies, but that's just singular terms. They're not being nuanced enough. The word to put in front of that is some. Some customers, if you've got no experience, are not going to look at you. Sorry, you're just not good enough. If you want to be an executive leadership coach and you want to coach the C-suite at Morgan Stanley and you have no experience, technically it's physically possible that could happen. You will not get that gig though. It just won't happen. But can you coach someone else? Yes, you can. And I think what's really important here, Jack, is people understand there's this idea I have of leverage. The reason why we get certain gigs is the leverage we have. Everyone can find leverage, no matter how young or inexperienced they are or how experienced they are. For some, it's easy. I have a customer, for example, she went to Harvard, then she worked in Wall Street for like 15 years. So she coaches people who are like in Wall Street and they're like, you're like me. I resonate with you. You're the same age. You get me. You understand the pressures. Let's go. It's simple. Now, if you don't have that kind of those optics, then what you might have is experience. I just literally got off the phone with a new customer. She's 57 years old. So her leverage is, I have seen it all. I'm the grown-up. And so is wisdom. Now, others, it might be the genetic lottery's been won. I want to work with them. They look good. Or it might be that you've got the popularity. You've got the followers. You see what I mean? So it doesn't have to be that we compare ourselves and say, I need to be there now. It could be, well, I ask myself, what is my flavor of leverage? And it might be something different. But I think the key here is we have to, I'm never one to lower people's aspirations, but we have to be real sometimes about what's realistic. And what I mean by that is it's so crucial that we are cool with the dark years of like no one interested. You're scratching around for little deals. One of our mutual friends who's been on your podcast, Hala Taha, started her podcast and no one was listening to it. And now she's top 10. And it's like, no one thinks about that stuff, but you have to go through it and get there. So sometimes your leverage is you charm them enough with your obsession to win that they give you a chance. And that's all you got. And because they did, you do what I did when I was in my 20s, which is you get that one deal and then you go to the next company over, to the next person over, like the adjacent person. Hey, I did this thing with this person you trust. Would you give me a chance? And now you got two. and then maybe one slightly higher, and so on. And that's how you grow, because otherwise you're relying on lottery ticket win style strategy, which is just a terrible strategy. It's a case of, where can I gain my leverage, and in what, and what would the people who want to consume or buy from me need to see in order to feel he's my guy or she's my girl?
I think the difficult thing there is you describe there still being a need for someone to go first, right? And that's what people don't want to hear. People don't want to hear that there's still a necessary component of, I have to do the uncomfortable thing. I have to initiate before I have any feedback, before I know what the outcome is going to be, before I know how people are going to perceive me for doing that thing. And I know for me, the most difficult part of the entire journey with the podcast was the initial outreach process. My first guests were my mom, my dad, friend down the street, a friend I knew that was an influencer, like all those things. And then I'm like, all right, it's time for me to level up. And so I started sending DMs and DMs and DMs. And it took me literally over 200 DMs to get a response and a yes from someone that someone that was bigger, someone with a few 100,000 followers. And that process was so grueling because anyone rational would say, what are you doing? You're crazy. Give up. And that's the part where, for a young person that has no proof, that has no experience, you're saying that you still need that first thing to get your leverage. And at that point, I literally had zero leverage besides my obsession and my conviction that it was going to work. And I'm not sure if you can teach people that.
No, you can't. You got to want it enough. The problem, the people who fail are the ones who are like, I want money. I want to be a millionaire. And it's like, you don't care enough about what you're doing to get there or the crusade you're on. And it's like, you have to believe in it a bit. Otherwise, people are like, why would they want to meet you at, you want money? There needs to be more to it, you know? And so, you know, you're doing the right thing there. And the thing is, people do think it's ridiculous if you do 200 messages of outreach, but that's the point. That's the barrier to entry. That's why people quit all the time. I think it's here in the UK, it's some outrageous statistics, like it's some huge percentage, if not a majority, of businesses are dead in 5 years. I know one of the stats is, in 10 years, the statistic is 1% of businesses are still operating. So 99% of businesses are dead by the end of that 10 years. And it drops off a cliff at the start as well. It's because people don't have the staying power. And you said a rational person. Another word for that is like an average person. That's the point. So when I first started selling, my very first job was sales. I was on telesales. So I was cold calling business owners. And my job was 100 dials a day, to try and get 3 or 4 conversations. That was it. And to do maybe 2 pitches. And my job was to do $100 a day, so $500 in a week. It was all monitored. Like 2 to 3 hours on the phone, that would be, because some people would speak to you a bit. And the idea is it would yield 1 sale at the end of the week for a couple of £1,000. Part of that would pay for me. Part of it would go to the company. That was it. Rinse and repeat. I did that for I became a manager really early. It was like 18 months in. I did that literally non-stop. It's not just that I wasn't account managing or like having meetings. I wasn't even allowed to sit down, Jack. It was literally like boiler room. I was literally stand and call all day long. Like, here are your leads. I found my own leads, go and call non-stop for a year and a half. So reps. And it was crazy. And what happens is, after a while, you start to not suck a bit and you learn a bit. And so what happens is you learn, like with your 200 DMs, which you'll agree is not that many in the scheme of things. What happens is, over time, you're like, they aren't landing. Maybe I'll change it and try this. I'll try this. And you get punched in the face a bunch, and you are adapting, and eventually you start getting good. And by my peak, if you look at now, I had 1 call today and it's a deal, you know, rather than dialing and grinding all the time. So you just get better. But the absurdity of wanting to jump the queue and not put in the effort is insane. And the thing is, all the most successful people in the world are screaming that lesson at you all. I'm speaking to myself when I was younger as well. And it's like, yeah, I don't want to hear it. I'm sure I'll be different.
Hmm.
But there are things that can help you jump the queue a bit. But you can't. Everyone wants to be the big CEO, but they're ill-equipped to be the big CEO. And if you speak to, if anyone's run a team, which I've done many times over the years, it is not strolling around throwing money everywhere. It's other people's headaches. And, you've got to make payroll and help people pay their mortgage and like hit these new targets. Like it is insane. And I think that the problem is there's a lot of glamour, isn't there? And people can fall for that. But you've got to be willing to go stand in the fire. And it's not for everyone, but the people who can tolerate it and weirdly start to love it, they're the ones who'll be absolutely fine.
So you said there are a few things that you can do to jump the queue. And I don't want to be the one that's obsessed with getting ahead without putting in the effort, but
Of
you
course.
got my curiosity. What are some of those things that someone can do to jump ahead?
This is where the balance is, because you can grow organically by just like imagine like you do your 200 DMs. Imagine do that every day forever. Sure, you'll start getting more people. Eventually, you'll get some because there's enough people in the world. But that's not growth. That's just showing up. That's consistency and discipline, and they are important. But the jump in the queue things is a case of saying, well, what does more optimal look like? And more optimal is maybe you're changing wording or you're thinking about psychology and so on. But then there's even better things that really help you jump ahead. So things like cognitive biases and considering what the other side would want to see. So the way we often come to all this is seller-centric. As in, we approach this with, what do I want? I'll go and ask lots of people for the thing I want. Hey, and then, some of us are well raised enough, we're polite or even thoughtful enough that we do a bit of research. But then what's better than that? Well, opening doors or being in certain rooms. Some people are born with privilege. Some people are born into families that have strong networks. There's no surprise when you see a super successful parent and then their child is super successful because, of course, they got into those rooms. But for mere mortals, you tend to find there are things you can do. So one really good example is association bias. So association bias is when your audience sees you with someone else, if that other person they know well and trust, they will assume by extension you're trustworthy too because you came together. You see a fair bit of people trying this where they go and like shake hands with an influencer and then post it. Hey, look, I get to be with this person. The picture with Gary Vaynerchuk kind of thing. And that's cool, but it's not quite there because everyone else does that and it doesn't work anymore because it's not saying I'm friends with Gary Vee. It's like, oh my God, it's Gary Vee. I happen to have met him. So it might impress some people, but to really jump ahead, the question is, who am I being seen with, or what rooms am I in, and in what context? So we have to start saying to myself, and this is the world of brand or personal brand and positioning now. It's how do I need to be seen by the people I want to attract? So if I want premium, high ticket people to see me in the right way, they need to see me with similar people to them. So again, when I really cracked this, Jack, I was in my mid-20s and I remember I pitched a company who had worked on a project with another one of our clients. So I was literally like, I sailed past the receptionist. Normally they're like, what do you want to speak to them about? And this person was like, oh yeah, no problem. Because I literally said, it was something like, hi, can I speak to Jane, please? It's about the work we're doing with Mark at this company. And I'm like, yeah, no problem at all. And so I got straight through. So suddenly I had access. So jumping the queue is a case of saying what needs to be true for me to be in the room with someone slightly bigger than me. So I applied this in 2018 in January when I started posting on LinkedIn. And what I did was, I was tiny, I had no followers or anything. I found someone slightly bigger than me. I remember there's a guy called Brian Schulman. He was like Mr. LinkedIn. He had his LinkedIn cap and he was a big fan of it all. And he had 26,000 followers, I remember. And what you're looking for is a bit more clout, but also a willingness, because he's got a big heart, a willingness just to say hi. A lot of people are like, no, I don't have time, which is fine. But there'll be a few who are like, hey, I'll reach down and lift you up. And we got on a call. He's lovely. We shared I recorded it. I shared a clip or two on LinkedIn. tagged him. Some of his audience were like, oh, we love Brian, who's this Richard guy. And just those little things, that helps you jump ahead. So when in a world obsessed, if we look at online, in a world obsessed with volume, how many likes do I have and so on, I was always focused on, instead of those big volume numbers, who are the people I'm interacting with instead. So I just spent my time in the DMs, making professional friendships and connections. And then, rather than being all performative, they're like, we're shooting the breeze about basketball or like what they did at the weekend or, and so then they're like, hey, I'm going to this thing. Why don't you come with me? Or suddenly you're on a podcast because they've mentioned you to someone. Do you see what I mean? So it's that kind of very intentional thing. That's one of many things you can do to really jump the queue and move things along quicker.
I mean, I think that's what I've done my entire life. But what I see happening right now is podcasting is much more common now. So there are a lot of people that are reaching upward in that way, right? They ask someone like yourself to be on an interview. We collaborate on a post. Your followers see me, but I imagine they're less likely to go to my page and follow me than they would have been 5 years ago when there are less people interviewing you or less people following you. How do you combat that? How do I combat that? How do I start to have my leverage being other people? How does that become more valuable to me in the world that we live in now, where there's so many other people using that same strategy? I had a friend the other day that came up to me and told me how much this show means to him right now, how much value he's getting out of it, how much he's learning, and he wanted to show me his favorite episode of the show. So he pulls out his phone and he pulls up YouTube. And when he gets to my account, he wasn't subscribed. Now, he thought it was so embarrassing. I kind of found it hilarious, but it prompted me to look at the statistics. And I found out that 62% of you are not subscribed to the channel. Now, that's all right. I don't want to put you on the spot or anything. But if you get value out of the content that me and my team are putting out there for you, if you feel like this is improving your life, and the Grateful Podcast is having an impact on you, and you want it to keep getting better, then the one simple free thing that you can do for me and my team is hit that subscribe button. It shows the world that we have value to give, and it helps us continue to show up better each and every week, bringing on better guests, increasing the production quality, and putting out more content for you guys to continue to show up better in the world for tomorrow. So if you feel like this has any value for you, I would encourage you just to hit that button. And I really, really appreciate the impact that we're having on the world together. You're a part of this journey, and that's one of the coolest things. You have made an impact by being here, by sharing the knowledge and the wisdom that you gain, and by applying it into the world and creating a ripple effect. So thank you. Now let's get into the episode.
This is where the human to human thing really matters. And people use words like authentic and so on. What you got to remember is that not all people are the same. And what's so good about that, it's annoying, but it's also good, is because what we're looking for is people with whom we resonate a lot. So for every 5 people you meet who potentially are, let's say they're more, they've done more, they're bigger or whatever. For every 5 you meet, there'll be maybe one that you just, the ones where you just click and you get on so well. And if you look at all your interviews, I bet there are some where it was maybe a little strained, but hey, they showed up and were polite enough and they did it and they answered your questions. And you were like, okay, this is what it is. And then there are others where you like, oh, we're going to be friends for ages. You mentioned one earlier, for example, we're going to be friends for ages. We just get on. The thing that's happening there is that person likes you on a human level. And I have a saying, which is before we are our job title, we are humans first. And that means a lot because, you might get a big shot CEO who's just really impenetrable and won't be spoken to and won't be interested in socializing. And that's maybe their own problems. But then you get another one, the same level, who's just open to someone like you. And what we're always, this idea of finding our tribe is crucial. What we're always looking for is what kind of people like me for who I am. And it's not because I've worked really hard to try and be someone for them. This isn't about being really contrived. What it's more about is saying, do I click or get on with this person? Maybe it's just like on our energy levels, or well, we're into the same things, or we see the world in the same way. And I have a lot of friends who like are professional contacts, but have been really good friends, and we don't connect at all on LinkedIn. We connect here on WhatsApp, and the tell is, and again, you can reverse engineer from this. The tell is like a really good example, right? My friend Jody, she's an exited founder. Her business is a rocket. She's just won yesterday the GB powerlifting championships for her category. Just a born winner. And if she thinks of something that I might be interested in, she'll WhatsApp me. She's like, I thought of you because of this thing, And so like a bit like a friend would. And what we're looking for is to say, what kind of person do I need to be? And ideally the answer is some version of myself for the people I interact with to be like, he's a good guy. So what it isn't is fawning and fanboying. Elon Musk has friends. Elon Musk also has too many people who are like, oh my God, pick me. I'm a really big fan. I really like your work. And he's immune to that because everyone does it. So he probably likes people who are fairly cerebral and into the things he's into like the kind of subculture fun poking that he likes. Do you see what I mean? So
yeah,
that's hard to uncover, but you win by this crucial bit of advice is every day you connect with some new people, not as many as possible because big is good, like 8 or 5, but like you have meaningful interactions with people one-on-one, and it really works because you recognize there's fallout, you recognize some won't care, but by continually uncovering, not about volume, but about depth each day, you start adding a really strong network who start to vouch for you and think of you. Oh, I've got this guy, you should meet Richard. The number of you should meet Richards is outrageous. And it happens from the word go. So that's the advice at the start. In March this year, there was an email sent between two people, which was you have to meet Richard. And it was internal at LinkedIn. And it was one of the people at LinkedIn in the UK telling the one in New York that for their annual conference for the top 50 salespeople, where they have one external speaker each year, it should be Richard Moore. Last year was Sahil Bloom, and it was me this year. Because it's not just, oh, look, I'm sharping, writing posts. It's I'm in there, being useful and like messaging and speaking and being part of it, If you are out for yourself only, your ability to mask that is totally outperformed by their ability to call it and tell. They can read that you're trying to just get something from them. So I suppose the short version is just playing the long game, which sucks for people, but the long game is actually the short game. Otherwise, you're just trying to scrabble around and get instant results, and you take even longer to get there, ironically.
I love that. We've already used, I have this framework I've developed and teach to Gen Z around how we can create more agency in our lives, because I do believe that agency is one of the determining factors in the success we see among younger people. And one of the differentiators between the ones who are victims to the algorithms and the technologies to the ones who profit off of them, right?
Well said,
and it starts with initiate, which we already talked about. Do the hard thing, then do that for a long time, play the long game. And then the last one is finding joy in the ordinary. And we can get to that in a second. But what I found really interesting, what you just talked about, is the humanness and who you are as a person being the thing that gets you to the next level that you want to be at, right? That being your weapon, your secret weapon in a way, toward leveling up and toward getting people who to believe in you when you have nothing to prove. I think it's really.
I was going to say, you got it. It's about being a good guy, and like, but always look at it from their perspective. This is such a good question. If people are taking notes, when you ask yourself, what would need to be true for them to think of me? And it doesn't have to be always for the next gig where I get paid 18 grand. It might be that they think of me for recommendation for a podcast, or they think of me for like just the thing they thought of that day. Because every time you get that, it's like, I must have planted a seed somewhere. So it's always saying to yourself, am I showing up as someone who's interesting or stimulating? And interesting and stimulating takes a whole variety of forms. Because for some, they'll dig you if you're into music. For others, that doesn't work. They'll like you more if you're funny. For some, like for me, in heaven, I'm talking about work all the time. I just love it. And I tend to find I gravitate to people who just want to work. We love it so much. The pleasantries, we just want to talk about work all the time. And it's just our happy place. And so you have to find your flavor, then go find your tribe. And as long as you're right, though, as long as you're not doing it with those who have this scarcity mindset or with the people who just want to have nice chats and aren't like ambitious and going places, then you're not hanging around with average people who just want to talk about your thing. You're hanging around with people who might open doors.
I love that. I think a lot of that has to do with understanding the psychology of people you're interacting with. A lot of your background is in psychology.
Yeah.
If a young person starting out with, again, no experience, had to know one thing about human psychology that could help them get ahead, what would that be?
That's a really good question. Well, I have an answer, which also gives us an action as well, which is great. So the one thing we need to know about human psychology is the human animal, okay, before culture and civilization, the human animal will make a judgment. Whether you like it or not, or that's fair or right or whatever, they do make a judgment. And they're making a judgment on like if this person is interesting, stimulating, a threat, or someone to devote some energy toward, or if I should be indifferent to them. They are going to make a judgment. So therefore, with no experience, we should be saying to ourselves, the judgment is going to be them-centric. So therefore, I need to lead with some sense of what they would find valuable in this exchange. And of course, there's many different contexts to what the exchange might be. So we have to broadly look at value in two forms. There's practical value. I can help you achieve X, Y, or Z. Or there's emotional value. I can make you feel A, B, or C. Right? So often we meet people socially at emotional value, but we might meet them at practical value as well, because there's these both parts to this in the human. The action that this informs is the bit that people don't want, which is exposure. The number one thing, especially if you've got no experience and if you're young as well, the number one thing you've got is time. I have 2 kids. I have loads of different things I'm doing, and so I can't just devote my time nonstop to things. Also, as you get older, like you can't, it sucks, but like you can't be up till 3 a.m. by default and just stroll out of bed the next day. You have to get your sleep, And so like you've just got time, which you should be deploying at like, I remember my boss was so right. In my 20s, he's like, in your 20s, and this isn't for everyone, but he said, in your 20s, you should be running through walls every day, running through walls, just exposure, be on the pitch. Do not sit back consuming, go and create, like get out there. And I was super shy, Jack, like really nervous. And I was on a telesales cold calling job. It was a nightmare, but like, just do it. Like, just get on with it. And like, yes, it hurts. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it hurts. It starts hurting a bit less, or you get used to it hurting, but exposure is king. And because what happens is you're doing this thing of interacting with people, you're starting to get feedback. And what happens is you start getting that experience and then you get better and better and better. It's a flywheel. So that's the one thing. It's like recognize that you're going to meet them at their judgment and you're going to meet them therefore you need to ideally meet them at something for them. What would make them go, now that one's different? So like Seth Godin, who I'm sure in the future will be on your podcast, for example. Seth Godin, I remember over 10 years ago, he responded to an email. I just emailed him cold. But it wasn't because it was like, oh my God, Seth, you're great. It was, Seth, I just read this book when you said this thing. I'm interested in how you feel about that now, given this thing had happened. And it was like, I was speaking about something he was interested in. I did the same with Adam Grant, the professor from Wharton, responded no problem. And it's because rather than going, oh my God, I'm a fan, can you give me something? I had no earned right to ask for anything. Instead, I gave them something, which was, remember Adam Grant, it was like, I read your 2013 paper on game theory or whatever it was. Do you really feel that this is the case or whatever? Could you elaborate on more? I'm asking him about his baby, his thing he's obsessed with. Of course he's going to answer. You know what I mean? So that's the key, is meet them where at at them, and therefore then the judgment will be a good one. And they will want that's how you get real depth with interesting people. You know, there's how many tweets are there on X every day? But Elon Musk still responds to some. He responds to the ones that are stimulating to him rather than the ones that are like, Elon, I think you're great. Of course he doesn't, because there's too many of those. So and we all know this deep down, but that's our start point.
My friend Allison just told me this mind-blowing statistic by organizational psychologist Tasha Urich. 95% of us believe that we're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% of us really are. And I believe that gap is the difference between good and great performers in this world. The greatest people that I've interviewed on this podcast understand their capabilities and what they're good at better than everyone else. And they understand what they love to do and how they show up for the people around them. I imagine that when you heard me say that statistic, somebody in your life popped up that doesn't truly understand the way that they show up for other people, and they have some type of misperception between their identity and the identity that others have attached to them. And maybe that's you, which is why I believe so deeply in Interview. Interview is a software that allows you to take a self-assessment and compare it to anonymous feedback from the people closest to you in your life, revealing your gap in self-awareness and helping you close it. So if you've ever been curious about how you show up for the people around you, or you want to improve your self-awareness, head to yourinnerview.com, yourinnervue.com, and use the code GRATEFUL20 for 20% off a Tier 1 interview assessment, plus a complimentary coach-led debrief on your report. Let's get back to the podcast. So help me understand how exposure is related to helping curate someone's judgment of you. Is it just that you expose yourself to more feedback so you can get better at how you show up for someone else?
Yeah, this is precisely because the big issue is conjecture and hoping that thinking or guessing or filling out some form or worksheet will help us work out a formula that gives us the answer we want. No, it's exposure, like getting on the pitch and getting feedback. So I have a it's kind of funny. I have this saying called P.A.R. is what you want to use. And often I use it in workshops and I make it sound like it's really serious and really important. I always say, like, everyone write this down. P.A.R. is really, really important. P.A.R. is where we start and then we will go from there. And they're like, okay, what do you mean? What is P.A.R.? P.A.R. is, everyone ready? P.A.R. is probably about right. And what I mean by that is you start at where probably about right is. What that means is, I think probably what would be about right for this person to read if I send them a DM? Probably about right. Because we can use some guesswork and then get the hell on with it. Just do it lots. Sorry, but do it lots isn't for 5 minutes. Do it lots is for actual years. And of course you get some wins along the way and it'll be blips. Sorry, it's how it is. And the thing is, I remember someone once was like, how are you so good at selling? And it's like, I've done it for decades. Do anything for 20 odd years, you tend to be quite good at it. And so it's the same with this. It doesn't mean you have to wait. I believe in being impatient. It doesn't mean you can't get sales or can't get results from the start, because you get some lucky breaks. You get some things along the way and they all compound. And the moment you get one, like I said earlier, you can use it to inform the next one. But probably about right. What do you think probably the start point is? So start and get on with it. And I think overthinking and staying in behind the start line, using conjecture, going, but what about if I did it like this? You don't know the answer, and no one will be able to tell you specifically how to interact with your ideal people. Only you can uncover that. So create a start point and go from there. You'll soon evolve, I promise. With enough exposure, you start evolving really quick, because the feedback is like awful, or it's like, hey, I'm actually getting something. Let me just test the slight left or slight right of it, But the biggest teacher is just exposure.
I love that. I think a lot of people are doing things out of just a feeling of what may work. Thinking, I think that's what they're doing. I'll try that. That has to be your starting point. But actual evidence-based, like this is what works, is when you start to see that that growth compound, that growth accelerate.
But here's also why is that what the mistake otherwise is we model what we want. So we look at what people who are winning are doing, and when we go, okay, I'll try and do that. But they weren't doing that at this stage. They were doing something else. Everyone's, exalting someone like Alex Hormozy online. That's cool. But like what he does now, you're trying to do that, but you're down here. Like you need to do what he was doing. No one likes to hear the advice, which was he shared a sofa or shared a room with someone. They like slept on the floor for actual years and had no money. The moment he made a bit of money, he wasn't going all bougie and buying a car or pretending to be wealthy. He just locked in the dark years. That's how it is. But no one wants, they all want his money, but they don't want to do the stuff to get there. That's the thing. And it's the same advice all the time. But I do think we've got to remember this. It's great to see signals from the people we look up to, but it's dangerous to try and emulate what they're doing right down here at the start. I mentioned Gary Vee earlier. Like he's got a team of like 30 people just for Team Gary Vee on his socials, doing hundreds of pieces of content a day. Then can you see how laughable it is when you have soloists trying to go all in on all the platforms, and it's like, you won't do it. It won't work. It will be not as good because you're meant to have a job and customers as well as doing this full-time job. So bit by bit, but any progress is still progress, and people have to be cool with that. And I just feel like some kind of granddad here, man. I'm just giving you cliche after cliche, but the truth is the cliches are there for a reason. It's because we all learn after a while. We all look back and we're like, just got to do the thing and be cool with sucking. But I want the big customers. Yeah, I'm sure you do, but you don't get them until you earn it. And that's fair and that's good. It's wonderful now. I'm 45. I can't miss. I get paid loads of money by really great companies because I've earned it. And so when you've got the receipts, you can't miss. But I was at zero and I was like, it was like abuse, man. I was like, for the first year, I was getting sales in my job in 2003. But people are hanging up the phone. They're screaming at you. You go home, you've got no money. I had like the money I was given as a basic salary just covered rent. And I'm like, what am I doing? And I'm looking at all my friends who got these other jobs. I'm looking at people who seem to be making money. And I was like, oh, you must be doing really well. You're wearing a suit in London. I'm like, I'm so broke. It's awful. And it's depressing. But you have to have, then that's the fun bit, is like you have to craft a delusion that the universe is rigged in your favor and act accordingly. And everyone's always like, I remember, it's so profound now we're talking about it. I remember the first time I didn't go to the pub or to a bar. I stayed at work because I was pitching, and they're like, really? Come for a beer? I'm like, I'm just going to do one more pitch. And I remember it was a sale, and it was just like, I just chose to do that stuff. And it's funny because you look back, and again, it's not for everyone. So this is not prescriptive, but it's for some. I remember, people are like, oh, you've done so well or whatever, how you did that thing. That's really cool. And they're like, how have you done? It's like, can you tell? And I'm like, that thing on Netflix? And they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, I didn't watch it, and it's like, it's sacrifice. I don't sit watching telly. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with telly. I am doing the thing. And it's because I found the thing that works for me. And I think that doesn't mean everyone has to do that. And you can find your own form of success, but you could be willing to give up stuff. And I hate so much that life is compromise. You can't do everything. You can do anything. So you have to choose. But it's not hard after a while when you're like, I do think this will take me in the right direction. I believe in it. And so it's like, well, just for a few years, because I have a long enough life, hopefully a few years, let's just not bother with watching TV and playing PlayStation, because it'll always be there. Or at least dial it down a bit, and I can focus on this instead. But like, everyone will cheer you on. No one will believe you. And, the closest people to me were like, when are you getting a job again? When I left London and started my company, I'm like, this is the job. They're like, really? Come on. I'm like, no, big stuff. And like, they don't believe it. And then suddenly they're like, oh my God. And I got a book deal this year. Like Wiley,
Man.
with top 5, thank you. Like Wiley, top 5 publishing house got in touch. They're like in the DMs on LinkedIn. Hi, can we give you money to publish a book? I'm like, yeah, go on then. So they're like, how? I'm like, just because you don't stop. Make it your obsession. That's the thing. Anyway, it's so weird. I sound like it's all the cliches, but they are genuinely true. You just got to believe me.
I love it. Just a quick note from me, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify and you've enjoyed this episode so far, the one thing that you could do to create a better podcast for the future, yes, you're a part of this, is to leave a review. Leave a 5-star review or a 4-star if you think I deserve it. I hope I'm not below that. And just tell the world what you really think of this podcast, how it's supported you, how it's helped you grow, what you've learned. And it would also help me just understand how I can continue to show up better for the world and create a better place for people to learn and grow. Thank you. What was the timeline between you leaving your corporate job and your business starting to work? People starting to be like, oh my God, you're doing it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You remember I came from sales. So one thing I could do was close. And I'd gone from, I was a sales director at a recruitment business. So I was like, it was hard though. I was still doing cold stuff. And suddenly I'm on Facebook in 2014, messaging solo founders going like, hey, I see like you're running a business. And I was like, I could help you with selling. And they wanted to talk to me. So it was really not hard. So I was like, this is weird. They all want to talk. And it's because they're like, oh my God, someone's willing to speak to me. And so I just like, you got to remember, I didn't find that too hard. It was like really simple for me because I was used to it being difficult to close. And suddenly they're like, yeah, take my money. I need to make rent this month. And so like, well, we need to do this then, don't we? And so I was sales managing these founders essentially, but it was early that I started making money, but it was not early that everyone's like, oh my God, you're really killing it. It wasn't like that at all. It was hard because I came from a place where it was like, if I stroll in the office in the morning, I know I'm getting paid that month. I get a salary and the company exists and the marketing's done if there is any, or like, you know, like the lights are kept on. Whereas now it's like, there's literally nothing. You have to be the unicorn wearing all the hats. And I'm sure you can relate to this. But what's different now is, what was different then it was like suddenly because of the urgency and the necessity of making money, to pay, I had a wife, I had a new baby, we had a mortgage, I had cars, to suddenly pay for that. Suddenly all the stuff fell away that didn't matter. So I did the thing I believe that everyone should be doing at the start, which is recognize you may want to call yourself a CEO or founder. The reality is you're a salesperson. You have to sell and you will grind selling. And then, you know, you get to do some of the fun stuff, sure, and the delivery, but you need to sell because otherwise where's the money? And so it was that, man. It was like that for like 3 years, 4 years. And it was nice when I got to like 6 figures and then I started making more than I did in the city. But I wasn't like this illustrious, well-known influencer. I didn't take that route because my thing was find the individuals, speak to them in the DMs, close them on a call. So it was all very quiet. I think it really started changing more when I went to LinkedIn. It kind of started to hockey stick up because distribution was so generous there, and it still is. And it's super supportive. It wasn't like saturated like Instagram. It wasn't fair. Like the trolling is non-existent by comparison. And so everyone was a bit more supportive. And, you know, I was just getting better at like sharing my leverage and the kind of results I'd been able to help people get. And, you know, people who win often haven't worked at big business, but they can share a great result or transformation that they've done. And people really buy into that. So I think it started to click then after a couple of years in on LinkedIn. You start getting like picked up for stuff and some interesting gigs come along. But it's an interesting one because I wasn't really going hard at trying to become like influencer style or anything like that. I was just like, if someone looks at me, I will over-index on speaking to that individual and going deep. And if there's an opportunity, there's a sale, you know? So I was focused on very low volume, but very deep interaction because that, ultimately I'm looking to close people as opposed to get fame and acclaim. It's a different game to podcasting because of course you need as many downloads as possible as opposed to just one person of the right type listening to you, I guess.
Yeah. It depends what you're doing or what the
Yeah,
business model is behind the
indeed.
podcast. I mean,
Yeah,
if
of course.
for purely sponsorships monetization,
Yeah.
and I need as many downloads as possible, but my skill is building deep connections and
Mm,
relationships with people, which is why like the business that I'm a part of now is so fitting for me. And I think
mm,
you only really find out those things, like what are you best at, what are you naturally good at, through taking the action.
agreed.
Um, but
But
it is interesting.
I had that same thought, and early on when I was on Facebook, in the mid 2010s, I started doing Facebook Lives, and like
Yeah.
I did 5 years. Every Monday, I did a live stream for an hour called Startup Business Q&A. 5 years, so 260 episodes I did, and I worked out it was 2,000 questions because people would come on, ask a question, and I would answer it. But the saying I came up with was that you hone your philosophy, and you're probably doing that. You're probably getting so good now at these interactions because you've done so many reps in the form of these episodes. And I just think people have got to be cool with doing things for years, and like that's your training.
Yeah. I also think with podcasting in general, it's like a lot of people will think, oh, my biggest goal is to make podcast sponsorship money. And it's like, that's a goal. I
Yeah.
want to get to the point where the podcast itself covers all the podcast expenses. But
Mm.
the podcast relationships have led to the opportunities
Oh,
that
yeah.
can cover all the podcast
Oh,
expenses.
yeah.
And there's indirect things that you don't always think about.
Of
So
course.
like, while podcast sponsorship monetization doesn't cover everything, everything's come from the podcast and the reps that it's given and the people that
Totally.
I've met from that. And
The doors will open. The doors will open. And also, it's those conversations you then have with some of the guests afterwards. And they're like,
Mhm.
hey, by the way, I love your podcast. I love what you've done here. I'm doing one too. Like, what does it look like if you gave me a bit of coaching on this or like explain it? And then it's like, okay, now I've got $5,000 for maybe 2 hours to explain this thing. And, so many things happen in the background, or they invite you to something. I was at Cannes Lions about 6 weeks ago, and that's just someone like going, "Hey, it's really good what you're doing. We're doing this talk at Cannes Lions in France. Would you like? Everyone's gonna be in town. Do you want to come along? We'd love you to do a talk." And it's like, yeah, it's all these fun conversations that happen behind the scenes. But like you say, you've got to open the doors in the first place, and it's you're just taking the right kind of action. As long as you can hold your breath and play long, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, that is the game. That is the game. Playing the long game and just having that pure conviction in yourself. And that's why, I mean, like I said earlier, the last step that I built this entire philosophy around is being able to find joy in the ordinary, being able to be grateful and ambitious at the same time. Because
Mm,
what we have right now, like, I want so much more than what I have, and so does everybody in this
yeah.
world. Everybody wants something, right? But all we ever have is this present moment. All we ever have is the moment right in front of us. And so
Mm,
if we want to truly work hard and put our head down and grind for something, we have to be able to look around and see what we already have that we can appreciate and live in the
yeah.
moment while we're doing that. That
Yeah, because
duality is so hard.
you're right. Because the thing is, you get more and more and more as you earn it, and so it's like it's that you can see the graph. It's almost flat forever, and then it goes up like this, and basically you get to a point where you're turning stuff down because you get so many cool things coming at you, but that's built on the shoulders of your past self that got there, and you just got to keep mining away, and eventually it starts picking up, and then it's like it is exponential. It's kind of crazy. You just got to keep fueling the fire. And it's weird how effortless it is when it starts really picking up. I just think that, yeah, and that's about the best advice people can ever hear is just to be willing to do that. And I love the idea of like embracing along the way. I think people need to wake up a bit when they can afford to put food in their mouth and do their thing and not lament over it not being any good or feeling like a failure because they're not at the level of their superstar hero or what they think are peers who are actually been doing it grinding for years or something. What you got to say to yourself is, I get to do this. It's not like I can't do this, because I have to go work for someone else, maybe I get to do this. And even if it's a side hustle, it's like I get to do this. And just ask yourself, what have I got around me? What's going well for me? I can put food in my mouth. I have my faculties. Some people live in pain every day, and it's like I think if we have that base level of gratitude, that's a really nice start point. You end up there anyway, so you might as well start young if you can.
Yeah. I mean, the world that we live in, we're constantly comparing upward, no matter who we are.
Mm.
No matter how much I achieve, I always compare myself upward to bigger
Yeah,
podcasters, right? And for you, you probably do the same thing. Even like 20, how many years have you been in the workforce? 25?
23 years
23?
now. Mm.
And I imagine you're still comparing yourself upward all the
So,
time.
so it's interesting. So I did learn. I've learned that. I mean, the fact is, I'm a human still. So of course you're like, oh, I want that. But then you
Mhm.
learn to go. But what did they do to get there? And you probably, well, you haven't done it, nor have you had their experiences or background, nor would you be willing to do it. And so get over it. And so this idea of coveting where someone is but not what they went through to get there is insane. But I've learned to compare differently. So what I do is the comparison is now very objective. It's like, oh, so they've done that. I did one the other day like this. It was like, they've done that. That's really cool. Could I reverse engineer that and try something similar myself? Let's do it. And so became a fun project, and we tried this thing. It became like this landing page and this product. It was kind of fun. What I don't do is compare myself with their life, because I think it's madness. You could actually have two identical looking people, same follower count, same bank account, and so on. One might be really happy, one might not. Or one might have got there effortlessly and one might not, because this one was born in a certain set of circumstances and this one hasn't. I'm a white male, highly educated with 2 degrees, living in the UK. I mean, it's like a lottery win. So the people need to have some perspective. I'm raising 2 daughters. Like, I have 2 sisters and was raised by a single mum. So I know just the gender thing alone, I know that they will get different opportunities to me. And so we've got to just know where we are and recognize that everyone has very different set of circumstances. And, I remember in my 20s, when I bought my first property, and we had friends who did the same. And I was like, theirs is bigger and more expensive. But then I learned, it was like, yeah, and their parents gave them 200 grand just to dump. And I was like, why? My mum couldn't give me 200 grand just to buy my flat, to make it myself. And I was like, so it's unfair? Well, which one would you rather be? And I was like, perversely, I kind of would rather be me, because this is literally me as opposed to a leg up. You know what I mean? So I don't know. We've got to always, I think we should play with comparison, really just stop and think, why am I comparing, and of what kind? Because there's some good lessons there too.
Amazing. That's incredible advice. I love that. And I love the idea that 2 people can live identical lives that are experienced completely differently.
Definitely.
Richard, this has been phenomenal. I'm so glad that you got to join me. I learned a ton. I had some questions in there literally specifically for me on the spot. I love that. So thank you, man. I really appreciate your
You're
time.
so welcome. I had fun. This went quick.
It did. Yeah. Where can people find you?
So LinkedIn's probably best. If you go to linkedin.com, then they do this weird thing is /in/Richard James Moore, all one word. Or my website is Art of Sell, not Art of Sales, artofsell.co. And you can find out more about the community and what we do there.
Amazing. Thank you, Richard. We did it! We made it to the end of the episode. Thank you so much. And thank yourself for showing up and committing to yourself to better yourself and your life for you and the people around you tomorrow. It's really impressive. I know with the attention spans that we have today, showing up for an hour or however long today's episode was is really impressive. So thank you. I have one ask for you. Before we move on from our days together, who did you think of today while you were listening, while you were watching? Who popped into your head during the best moment of today's episode? Whoever it is, you can send a time-stamped version of this episode with that certain moment that made you think of them to that person. And when you do that, they're going to feel so seen by you. They're going to feel so loved by you. I know it can be a little weird, but you can just say, hey, this made me think of you. And when you do that, you create a ripple in the world. You serve. You make this world a better place. So I encourage you, if you had someone that popped up today that you think of with this episode, who you think this could help better their lives and the lives of the people around them, then please send this over to them. Create a ripple. Make an impact. That's how we change the world, one person at a time. That's my goal. I want to change your life. I want you to go and change others. That's how a legacy is built. So I thank you for showing up today for yourself and the people around you to make this world a better place. Don't forget that no matter what you're going after, what gap you have between where you are and where you want to be, no matter how big it is and no matter how much anxiety that might create for you or how much excitement that creates for you, there's a present moment. Stay here. Be grounded. Be grateful for all the things and the people you have around you as you continue to go and serve the world and make this world better. I'm proud of you, and I'll see you next week. Stay grateful. Stay hungry. This has been the Grateful Podcast. Thank you.